Hey guys, this is Riley, your boy, and I'm in my office here. As you can see, I've got Cat Stevens, I got Sleeping Beauty, and this is a real human skull that I inherited from my grandfather. So welcome to my office, and this is a really special episode of this podcast that I think I just want to spend it talking about what I think is a really important topic. And I'm joined by my good friend, Dave Davenport. Here he is. Say hi, Dave.
Hey.
And Dave's works in data and tech, and he's working from home. Is that right?
Yes, I am.
So
quarantined at home.
You guys were early adopters of the quarantine.
We were early adopters.
You've been quarantined for 4 weeks.
Yeah, my wife got the flu weeks before the big corona quarantine started, so we started quarantining early.
So here's the topic that I wanted to bring Dave in, because Dave and I have talked about this stuff before, and I think that right now, with people just at home, some with nothing really a whole lot to do, many unfortunately have lost their jobs, and it's a bit of a tragic time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not to mention people dying and things like that. But for the general population, I was just texting with a friend who lost her job, at least for 2 or 3 months. And that's not easy. And so because of that, I think this is a time when a lot of people are going to be looking for comfort and just trying to kind of... I just noticed your raccoons in the back.
Yes.
Tell me they just like crossed a line one night at your house.
It's a story for another day. I was given them, actually. Each of my kids were given one, and I took all of them and I put them in my office. So
they're like, "Dad, I don't want this," and you're like, "I want it."
No, they wanted it, but I wanted it more. I thought they looked good on my wall.
So right now, I feel like a lot of people are going to be drawn to just things to help them get through this. And so one of the topics that, one of the issues, struggles I've had in my whole life is the issue of pornography. And I feel like right now, this is going to be a time when a lot of people who either, whether they want to or they really, really don't want to, are going to be drawn, or you might say tempted, or simply just desiring to watch pornography, go to pornography, masturbation, and other kinds of sexual acting out, just to kind of get comforted, or self-medicated, you might say, not to psychoanalyze or anything, but that's the reality. In fact, I read yesterday that according to some internet tracker, that pornography use is up 12% already.
Wow.
Now for pornography, if anyone's familiar with pornography, that's a lot of use. I mean, it's already a heavily used thing anyways. So to increase 12% is quite a bit.
Yeah.
So I guess we should start with saying, Dave, why is it that in times like this, what is it about a time like this that does draw people to porn?
I think it was many of the items that you mentioned. I mean, when you're struck with boredom, you look for something to scratch that itch. You look for something to do. And a lot of times, especially as men, just speaking from my past, when you're bored, you start surfing the web. And when you start surfing the web, things just progress, as you say, to the point where suddenly you may find yourself on a site, or you have navigated there just because, darn it, you're bored and you want something to do. Mm-hmm. Also, I mean, if you think about the things that cause any type of temptation, boredom, depression, a lost job, any one of those items can just draw you to any type of addiction, really.
In my past, as I have worked through this issue in my life over decades now, the thing that became real to me or true to me that I realized, and that actually really helped me work through this, is realizing that I am drawn to porn when I am either frustrated, afraid, uncertain, bored, like you said, or someone makes me angry, or if I feel out of control. I don't know, there's something about it. It never happens just for the heck of it. Is that right?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, speaking from my past, I became addicted to porn when I was in junior high, and it was something I dealt with years into our marriage, and it was exactly those times, and it's like you suddenly have free time, and you gravitate towards porn. It was just, that's what you did.
Mm-hmm. For a follower of Jesus, pornography kind of falls under what the New Testament calls sexual immorality, which is just the general term for any sort of sexuality or sexual expression outside of the covenantal framework of a marriage between a man and a woman. Like, that's the Bible's really narrow definition of sexual expression. And I think in our culture, obviously that sounds extremely narrow, but I've grown affectionate towards this idea or this image of fire, and how fire is safe in the hearth, but it's not safe outside the hearth. In the hearth, it provides warmth, security, light, and kind of general hospitality, something to gather around in your home. But outside the hearth, it burns the house down. And that's like pornography. Pornography is lust, is desire gone mad. It's exited its natural expression as designed by God, and now it can burn your life down. And so I think for followers of Jesus, we want to know how to be pure from pornography generally, but in a pandemic like this, it presents new obstacles. Let me ask you, what kind of, for the person struggling with pornography, what do they need to know about a pandemic and the situation around us? What do they need to know about how it interacts with pornography so that they can realize what's really going on?
I think the first thing that you have to realize and recognize is that you are going to be tempted. There's no doubt about it. And so if you don't plan as far as what your actions are going to be so that you're prepared for that situation, you're really setting yourself up. When I look at times in the past that have been difficult for me, it's those times when I'm bored, alone, have nothing to do, those types of situations. And what's been key for me, I'm happy to say that I'm in free of this crap for going on many years now, and it's learning to prepare. It's learning to recognize when you're going to be in a situation that will, hit all of those triggers for you, and having a plan to deal with that. And so the first thing is really having a plan. And what could a plan look like? Figure out what on earth you're going to do when you're bored with your free time. Right. I have really tried to focus on building habits in my life so that I can focus on, say, working out or reading a book or developing a new hobby, something like that. I found that keeping myself busy is absolutely key. And when you're stuck in your house for, we're going on 4 weeks here. Having things to do is just absolutely critical. And that's without going through a long list, that's immediately what pops to mind.
So plan. I think that's a really good first step. It's like thinking ahead and going, okay, here's going to be a time, maybe an indefinite amount of time, where because of a pandemic, maybe I can't go to work. I'm going to have to stay home. I'm certainly not going to be able to hang out with friends or gather in groups. And so I'm going to be bored. So what am I going to do? So let me ask you,
Yeah.
how did you do that? Did you write it down? Were they specific ideas that you made a plan for? Or was it general? Was it a reminder to think about it later? Or was it like, nope, at this hour, it's going to be this? Like, how rigid and specific do you get when you're planning what to do, when you're bored or have time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm here with 4 other people right now, and so a lot of what my free time centers around is changing shifts with my wife as far as who's watching the kids, and so
Yeah.
it's that part of the day is pretty darn well mapped out.
Yeah.
But as far as where the free time goes, personally, I've got goals that I've set up as far as things that I'm working towards. I'm big into endurance events, and so training is something that I've carved out time of the day where I just go and that's just what I do. And it's making sure, I just find that in general, in order to stay on task for anything, I personally have to have a plan for it. I want to know what I'm going to do when I get bored. I hate being bored just because it feels like a real waste of time to me. I don't like sitting there idle. I need to be doing something. And so I actually build up lists of, I write them down in my book. I build up these lists of, if I've got 10 minutes, I'm going to do this. If I got 30 minutes, I'm going to do these items. And so I tag them with that much time so that really, and this is just my weird eccentricity with this, so that when I'm bored, I can feel productive. And that's not just about, making sure that I'm not going to place myself in a situation of temptation. It's more about, I want to be productive and I don't want to be sitting around idle.
I have found in my struggle over the years that if I don't want to be pure from porn, I'm not going to.
Sure.
So there's the plan, which I agree with you. Like for me, it really comes down to knowing what certain boundaries look like. So when I'm home alone, and by the way, I think you already mentioned it, but married people struggle with lust and porn. I think that needs to be said, and we need to say that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That this goes well into marriage. It doesn't make a difference. All people, I think, many people of many different situations are struggling with this right now. And so for me, it's really like if my wife's out of town, if I'm home alone, if I know what's coming up for the weekend, and just kind of thinking through that and how does that interact with this real struggle I have. So the plan, so key. But that plan kind of flows from a place of actually wanting to be pure. And I know for many porn addicts or just people who casually struggle with porn, it's such a oscillating thing. One day you want to be pure, other days you just couldn't care less. So let me ask you, how do you cultivate a real strong and consistent desire to be pure from porn?
Yeah, that's a really good. I think you're asking 2 questions. One is, how do you protect against those times? So that, because like you said, if you don't want to be pure, you'll find a way. I mean, it's
right.
Plain and simple. You will. But how do you cultivate that? That's the other question. As far as cultivating, there's one a course that I did many years ago called Setting Captives Free, and it was this porn addiction course. And I think it was like a 30-day or 60-day type thing. And one of the things that's always stuck with me ever since doing that course is they talked about a verse in Jeremiah where God was talking to the Israelites and talking about how they had forsaken the spring of living water and said, built for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that would hold no water. And one of the illustration that they used around this was how our souls are these broken cisterns, and we are trying to fill them with anything, be it pornography, be it any type of sin, really. But how we need to go to God to be repaired and to receive this living water. And so what has stood out for me ever since taking that is how if we empty our life of something, we need to fill it with something else. And so cultivating a relationship with the Lord, it's absolutely key. I mean, yeah, you can stop doing something for a while, but I mean, you've stopped doing something great. Doesn't mean it's going to be lasting. I mean, it's not as if you can be free from porn and never struggle with it again. I don't think that's possible in this world. But if you're filling yourself up with Christ and filling your mind with Him, studying things about Him, it pushes that down and makes it less attractive, so that in those times of temptation, you got something there where you're saying, I don't want or need this, because you see that you have something better.
Now that sounds like a lot like prayer, to spend time. If you were to kind of say prayer is this general spending time with God, cultivating a heart for God,
prayer, reading and
learning,
studying,
learning and studying. And here's my question: is what you're talking about there sounds very different to what many people who talk about porn and trying to be pure from it. What many people, when they talk about prayer in regards to this issue, really they're talking about praying that it'll go away.
Right.
And it's like, well, you just need to pray. Did you pray, or have you prayed? And whether or not they mean it this way, but a lot of porn addicts interpret that to go, did you pray it away? Did you say, go away, porn, God, take this away from me? I mean, I found in my life that just, God's never done that. And I remember one time a friend of mine I was talking to, and I told him, this was maybe 10 years ago, I said, I wish God would take this away. And he said, God's not going to do that. In order to do that, he would have to take away your sex drive. And he was like, do you want that? I said, no.
No, of course not.
Sorry. So the point is that, like, here we're dealing with a natural God-given drive. It's part of humanity. It's part of our identity. And it's been warped and marred by sin in the flesh. And so in order to kind of get it back on track, God has to do that. And it has to be redirected. That's different than praying, God, take this away from me. You're not praying, God, take this away from me. You're praying, God, give me a heart for you. Fill me with you. Yeah. Was that an important thing for you to learn, the distinction between those two kinds of prayer?
Absolutely. And it was learning to rely on the Holy Spirit to give strength to make right decisions. And it was a realization that it's not something that I can do on my own power. You can only grit your teeth and with anything, you can only grit your teeth for so long and survive on sheer will and determination. But that time will come when your will crumbles, and so you need something greater than that. I really do. I think it's twofold. I think it's that, and I think it's also setting up appropriate safeguards so that when you go, ultimately, yes, the Holy Spirit will give you strength, but ultimately He's going to let you choose. If you decide I'm going to go jump off that bridge, they'll let you.
You're free to do that.
And that's the sort of the twofold approach of setting up those safeguards on one hand, so that if you decide that you're going to just go, you have at least something slowing you down, but then ultimately relying on the Holy Spirit, because it's something that I found over the years that the desire for porn diminishes. It's like, it's not just suddenly gone one day, but it is less and less and less.
Totally. And I've described it sometimes as the Triforce. This is from Legend of Zelda.
Oh yeah.
Triforce of wisdom, courage, and power. These three combine, and you become the hero of time. No, the Triforce of purity, and this applies to many, many issues in life, but especially to this issue, this was really key for me, and I've always kept this in mind, that the one triangle in the Triforce is proper boundaries and habits, and the other one is devotion to God, like you said, filling up with God, and then the third one is honest confession and community with brothers. How about that side of it? Is that a key part of it?
Yeah, it's absolutely a key part of it. And I think that especially for someone who is trying to get out of that type of addiction, that accountability and having someone who is going to ask you hard questions and encourage and mentor you along that path is absolutely critical. It was for me. It has been for everyone I've ever talked to who has struggled with this. Because it's very easy to lie to yourself, to justify and to make excuses. We'll let that one slide. We'll try again tomorrow. You need somebody, if you're serious about getting out of this, you need somebody who is going to ask you those questions and encourage you to grow too, who's going to call you out on your BS. It's been absolutely critical for me, and I like the Triforce illustration. That's good.
Now, you mentioned the word accountability, and I think growing up in youth group and trying to do accountability with a lot of my friends.
I hate that word.
I know,
word
right?
So much.
Okay.
It's
okay,
like Christianese, It's like this special word of,
So how can let's try and kind of clarify what that means, because I think the Bible has its own words for that, and that is confession, or even koinonia, fellowship, and just kind of that honesty. You see in the book of Acts when the revival hits Ephesus, and all the idolaters start burning all their idols and confessing their sins. It's like synonymous with coming to God is confessing your sins. And I think that when we hear confession, even the word confession sounds very Catholic. And I think for Protestant evangelicals, it's typically not really extolled as a practice with brothers. It's more of something you do to God. But if you read 1 John chapter 1, for example, it's all about confessing to your brothers. And so I think we can say, this isn't accountability partners in the sense of I always joke around. It's like in youth group, you're like, hey, bro, looked at porn last night. And then he goes, yeah, me too. And then you high five. And you're like, don't sweat it, man. God's grace. It's like, that's not real honesty. There's a bit more sincerity and actually some more love in real biblical confession. How can someone go and find that, though?
Yeah, that's a really darn good question. I mean, it's really seeking out a trustworthy brother who you're willing to share that with, willing to confess to, willing to have that person ask hard questions. Because the thing that I found was so key is needing somebody to ask that question and knowing that question was going to be asked. I remembered when I'd go on business trips, my wife would actually ask me when I got home how it went. And for one thing, knowing that question was coming was a real great deterrent. But on the other hand, it was necessary. I had a few accountability partners throughout the years, and I found that when I lost those, and when I lost that opportunity for confession, it became so much more difficult because, like you said, confession isn't something that is there's a huge emphasis on in the Catholic Church and the Orthodox churches, it's a sacrament, and it is something that is absolutely critical, and we treat it very casually.
What would you say then to someone, because I guess the idea for this topic came up really right as the pandemic was spreading and there was starting to be those rules like social distancing, stay at home. And I go, oh man, dude, that's a bad concoction for a lot of guys. A lot of people. And I mean, even outside of pornography, you get into other kinds of addictions or self-destructive behaviors. Absolutely. This is going to be hard.
You're hearing about
this is going to be hard.
Yeah.
Right. And so what would you say to someone who's really struggling right now, specifically with porn in their life, and they want help? What would you say to them?
Asking for help is always the hardest step, but it's the most critical one. The benefit of asking for help is that when you do that, you are bringing someone else into it who is, once you've extended it outside of yourself, it makes it a lot more difficult to go back. It makes it a lot more difficult to decide, it's not that big of a problem. I'll be okay tomorrow. And so reaching out to a friend, reaching out to a brother who you trust, is absolutely essential to it. And I'd say do it right now. Pause the podcast and do it right now, because it's not as hard as you think it's going to be, honestly. And because everybody thinks, especially with pornography, no one struggles with it like I do. That's crap. It's like the statistics are ridiculous. I mean, it's every dude struggles with lust in one form or another. And so you'll find that your brother will be a lot more understanding than you think. And it's not going to come as a surprise, because it's something that really every guy struggles with. And who knows, maybe you reaching out is actually going to spur them, and maybe they need that same help as well. So, and the first thing I do is reach out. There's a number of great sites that do online. That Setting Captives Free one I thought was awesome. I was a mentor with them for a number of years. And but one of the first things that it has you do is reach out and find somebody that you can talk to who is going to encourage you, because you need that. And the mentors in that program acted as those folks, but still they tell you to find another person outside of it that could encourage you, that was close to you. So
Reach out.
The first step, I'd say. Reach out. Yeah.
That's really good.
Which is really something that I wonder how many guys know who to reach out to or have someone to reach out to, because we guys like to lone cowboy it, especially when it comes to church. And so, I mean, that'd be the question I'd throw back at you is what's a good way for guys to find someone to talk to about these types of issues within church? Because I think a lot of us have very casual relationships when it comes to church.
The first time I reached out to a friend about this issue was in 10th grade. And it's after I had been watching porn for at least 3 years. And I remember it being so awkward and then so life-giving within a matter of seconds. Because
Wow.
I said, dude, have you ever done this? Have you ever struggled with this? I had known it was wrong, and so I didn't need that sort of like help in the sense of like, well, I wasn't wrestling with whether or not it was right or wrong. And so I think for many people that is where they're at. But for me, he goes, yeah, dude, me too. And I've never told anybody either. And it kind of brought us closer together, and we began to talk about it and just confess it. Now, I feel like we were too much in it together to really edify one another in a significant way. You need sort of like the mentor relationship on it.
Yeah. Somebody who's been through it.
Yeah, somebody who's been through it, who won't judge you, but who will teach you, you know? And so, like, for me, one of my friends is a pastor, and he and I talk on the phone about this, and he, you know, I can't even overstate how meaningful that is. And so what does it take to do that? Man, well, number one, I think the church needs to be a bit more honest about, hey, we're all broken people. And so there needs to be a vibe in the room that says, oh, I'm comfortable here. I'm broken too, you know. You know, have you ever been to a party? I mentioned this on another discussion with another friend in the video. I I thought of this idea of like, have you ever been to a party and no one said anything to you, but you just knew you were an outsider here?
Sure.
And I said, that's kind of how church can be, where
Yeah.
you know you have struggles and things you're really iffy on or really ashamed of, and there's just a vibe in the room. No one said anything, but it's just a culture thing.
Sure.
And so in order to change that culture, I think that's where church leaders come in, but really anybody in the church can contribute to change that culture of just going, oh yeah, oh totally, I'm broken too. I feel like there's a real fine line between helping someone in the way of Jesus and shaming them for what they've done. There's a fine line there. And man, I think we know it when we see it. And so if we're helping and extending help with honesty, that's good. If we're shaming, man, people are already ashamed. You know, they don't need that. It's like Jesus.
No.
It's like Jesus said in John 3:18 and 19. He said, I didn't come to condemn the world. You're already condemned. You know, I came to save it. And so I think it's a culture thing, but also I think for the individual, I don't know if we'll ever get beyond the need for the person in it to just take that step and take a risk, honestly. And I think a lot of people are afraid of being burned by it, but I think, and that might be the case, but I think more often than not, like you said, you're going to find it's way easier than you thought.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, though, with the mentoring part of it, though. Having someone who's gone through it and has found victory is so helpful, because they're able to give you advice. They're able to tell you. They understand the pitfalls. They understand the difficulties, different than someone who, say, you're both going through it together. Yeah, you can encourage each other as you go through something together, but having someone who's been through it, it's going to be, they're going to be able to offer much more sage advice and wisdom. That's for sure.
Sweet, man. Well, thanks so much, Dave.
Yeah.